Today we're going to take a drive in the 1951 Nash Airflyte. I've had this car for a few years now and got it going maybe a few months after I got it, but I haven't done a video specifically dedicated to it yet, and I figure it kind of deserved one because it's a really interesting car. They're kind of ahead of their times in a lot of ways because it looks like a big heavy car, but it's actually a unibody car, and it weighs about 3,000 pounds, which does sound heavy, but when you consider the cars of the day, it's really not that bad. And they also were pretty fuel efficient because they have a Borg-Warner overdrive. So when you get over a certain speed, about 25 miles an hour, if you have the overdrive enabled, it'll click into overdrive by itself, and then when you get below that speed, it'll kick out. And this car specifically had been sitting for I don't really know how long exactly, but I think the original family probably sold it in the 80s. And I've met the past two people that have owned it. I've talked to and I know them, and it never ran since they had it. The engine had been locked up, and they tried to get it freed up, but they didn't really want to get into a big project. But when I got this car, I took the engine apart and knocked the pistons out, and all I ended up doing was honing the cylinders and putting a new set of rings in it, put it back together, and it runs fine. It may burn a little bit of oil, but not bad considering the cylinder bore is probably out of spec, and it has the factory bearings in the bottom. Literally all I did was just change the rings and hone the cylinders, and it runs pretty good. And so I'm going to pop the hood and we'll talk a little bit about the engine. Here it is. It's a 184 cubic inch, about 3 liter, I think that is. Flathead 6. It's, Nash manufactured. They made these engines for a very long time. And that's a smooth running engine, and they're, you see the AC, that's all discussed in my other video, and still 6 volt as I talk about. And of course had to make the brackets for the AC, and the radiator, the original one, was bad, so this radiator actually bought off of eBay. It was intended for a Jeep CJ, and it was close enough in dimensions where it could be made to fit. But alrighty, the interior is not bad for its age. You see the headliner's still in place, although it's torn and it's kind of fallen in the back. And underneath these towels is the original upholstery, which is also a little rotten and torn, but when you consider how old it is, it's not bad at all. And here's what's really interesting to me, and that's the history of the car. Here, this is actually the original owner's manual that came with the car. And here we have the paper that lists, or it's the invoice. It lists the options: overdrive, undercoat, radio, and two-tone paint. All those options adding up to $241, and the grand total being $2,430. And I can't read the exact change, but pretty affordable by today's standards. And here the original owner's name is Arthur Charles Howe. And I did a little bit of digging on the internet, and that house, that address, is still there. And best I can figure, he must have bought the car and then immediately moved down to Florida. And because in the owner's manual, the address, I probably can't find it that quickly, but the address is erased. The original address was written down, and it was erased with a pencil eraser and then rewritten in an address here in Florida. And I looked up that house, and it's also still here. I really think it would be neat to find an original, or somebody, a family member of the original owner, or somebody that remembers the car as it was back then. They may have some neat stories, or they may have some pictures from back then, and that would really be special. I did a little digging on the internet, and I believe, as best I can figure, the original owner should have grandkids living today in Central Florida somewhere, and they would probably be in their 70s. And so that would be really neat to find somebody that remembered this car. One thing I thought about before we go for a drive is these cars are famous for their covered wheel wells. It looks like it has fender skirts all the way around. And if you go on the internet, people will say, number one is like, it can't turn if the wheels are covered, and it can turn. It has about the same turning radius as anything of that time period. Not real great, but it does all right. And the second thing is, people say, how would you ever change the tire? You can't get the wheel off because the wheel is covered by the fender. And so I thought that would be kind of neat to do a demonstration with the original bumper jack, which is in the trunk, that you can in fact change the tire. This is probably the only footage in existence of this happening. And nobody thinks you can change the wheel on a Nash. I have to say the bumper jack is a little bit sketchy. But I won't actually pull the tire off because you'll get the gist of it. Are we off yet? Okay, I think we're off of there. So look at there. You can actually, there's plenty of room. There's that much room. You can get the wheel off. So it's just a myth.